But let me pull us back.
Okay.
So do we influence yourself through your thoughts, or do we influence yourself through your emotions? Hi there, everybody. Welcome to Through a Therapist's Eyes. This is actually December the 1st. Did I get that right this time?
Yes, you
Because
did.
I usually
Yes.
screw that up.
Actually Thursday.
It's actually Thursday indeed. We had holiday schedules, so we popped in here on a Monday, did a surprise recording, did some different things, and so bear with us through the holidays. We're going to stay with you through Christmas. Although I haven't looked at the Christmas schedule. I'm looking at the calendar on the other side of my office, which falls on a Sunday this year.
Christmas is on a
And
Sunday.
New Year's.
And New Year's as well.
That's right.
Holy cow. Saturday night on New Year's Eve. That's going to be crazy. Across the great land. So this is Through a Therapist's Eyes, where you get to get insights directly from a panel of therapists in personal time at home or in your car, being aware it's not the delivery of therapy services in any way. Know that we've got the book still out, Re-Understanding Emotions and Becoming Your Best Self. That was cool, man. Adam, held the book up to the camera when we did that last week. That was like,
Well,
wow.
You have like 4
Pretty
copies
cool.
right there.
Well, yeah, there are. Yeah, well, we sell them, We are switching a little bit. Neil, when we doing the YouTube thing, is that far off? I've been saying that, and I'm not sure. Okay, so maybe first of the year we're going to kick for adding to instead of replacing with, right? YouTube, he shakes his head. YouTube Live, adding to the Facebook Live that we do. 5 stars always important. Help us out. We really want to grow the show 2023, and you are a part of that. So I would directly ask you to help us with an Apple review or a 5-star on Spotify, and most importantly, writing things out on the review in the Apple platform that works best. Seriously, it helps. It makes a big difference and helps us get found. So if you like the show, participate and help us out. Contact at Through a Therapist's Eyes to interact with us. We love getting that. This is the human emotional experience, and we do endeavor to figure this out together with all of you. Welcome back. We have Miss Kasie. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thanks for asking.
Good deal. Mr. John, we call you the Pope. Mr.
The Pope,
John
that's right.
Nelson Pope. How are
Yeah.
you?
Oh, when I was in the Navy, they'd say, Pope John.
All the time.
That's right. I'd shout out. Yeah.
And Miss Victoria, how are you, Miss
Hey,
Pendergrass?
I'm good. Pendergrass.
Pender.
Not Pinter.
No T?
No
No.
T. It's.
Did I say Penter?
Yes.
It's Pendergrass.
Well, I know how to spell it.
You want to know a fun fact?
What's that?
My husband is related to Teddy Pendergrass,
Yes. Yes.
Who's he?
Oh, you
All
don't
day
know?
long, just to hold you in my arms. That guy.
That guy?
Yeah.
Would
There
it
is
be
a
bad if I didn't know the song?
Yeah.
the singer. Yes.
Yeah. There was another one too. I think he died though, didn't he?
He did.
He
Yeah.
did.
He did. He had an accident where he lost his ability to walk. And
I have no idea.
okay.
Yeah. I just know he's related to
Distant.
my husband.
And
Distant
there's
relative.
His
also,
4th cousin. He's my
Oh.
husband's 4th cousin.
oh my
Oh,
goodness.
wow.
I've begun to find that I've started to realize I live under a rock. I seriously don't even know who
Well,
that is.
did you learn in history about Truman's, Harry S. Truman's mentor was named Boss Pendergrass?
I did not, Mr.
Yeah.
Academia over there.
Yeah. So.
Wow. Interesting.
And that was in Kansas City.
Is it Casey?
Yeah.
I can't read you.
Yeah.
Sure. Why not?
I feel like I'm on NPR.
NPR.
Yeah.
How so?
Just
I know what that
it
is.
just took a direction, I think.
Sorry, that totally derailed us with my fun fact.
And now
Indeed.
fun with flags.
Oh, wow. All right, let's get to the topic in that a question, can you control your mind and can you control your heart? And I think that this is an interesting topic because I find people with desperation in their mindsets when I'm doing therapy with them. Like I'll hear statements and I'll hear things that indicate that people really believe, you know what, I don't know how to do that. And furthermore, because I don't know how to do that, I don't think I can do that. So think about, do you believe that I feel the way that I feel and there's no changing that? That's one of the phrases that I hear and that I want you to think about. Secondly, how do I focus my mind on what I choose it to be focused on? we struggle to really grab ourselves and put ourselves purposefully in a space for the purpose of whatever that purpose might be. And thirdly, will the heart follow where your mind goes, or does your mind go where your heart is? How's that for a provocative question? I'm curious. I just want to open it up to y'all to see, particularly the last one, right? Let me say it again. Will the heart follow where your mind goes, or does your mind go where your heart is? What do y'all think about that?
I think that suggests that you're in alignment with both. And if you're in alignment, then I would say yes to both of those questions. I think there are times, though, when you might be misaligned, meaning that there are situations, circumstances where maybe your value systems or the feelings of your heart aren't always meshed with what you're thinking about or where your mind has to go to preserve yourself, to get through a situation, to kind of make a more rational choice than maybe what your heart wants you to make.
Alignment is we need to probably come back on that and see that. I think I'm going to do an unfair thing and roll around to both John, you, and Victoria. What do you think about that?
Okay. I was just thinking of a digestive calming thing called a line.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
It is not that quite aligned.
Hey, we haven't done an old joke lately.
This is John, we do an old
Does
joke.
that come on during Jeopardy or Wheel of Fortune?
We do that every week, brother.
Well, let me, and I was thinking about this, is that a lot of our, I'm not adding anything new, but just perhaps a little bit of an observation, and that is that that there is, how would I say this, is that our popular music so often, and it talks about that struggle between the heart and the mind, and people acting, and the disalignment or that's there. And I was remembering this old song, "You light up my life." Mm-hmm. How can it be wrong if it feels so good?
Right?
Right.
Feels so right. Yeah. How can it be wrong?
It can be a lot wrong.
Yeah, exactly. But a lot of our music reflects that.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. Yeah. There's a lot to be said in the songs that we create or that are created. And when I have a theme, I will hear songs. Not quite the one we started on with the Facebook Live before the mics come on. I don't know if you even know that one. But these songs and the way that people artistically sing about them, and you're right, like how can it be wrong if it feels so right? Do we go really blindly with our feelings? I probably should have had that as one of our 3 questions, because I think honestly a lot of times we do.
Well, then there's that song. And I want to ask Kasie to sing it, "Feelings."
Feelings.
Oh dear.
Oh, feelings. Go ahead.
That's right. Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean,
We have 2 that go off onto
Yep.
song now, Victoria. I don't think you
I
and I
feel
are
like
gonna.
we're on the right side of the room. And they're on that side of the room. You don't want me singing over you.
Indeed, but you know what I mean. I mean,
Uh-huh.
if it feels so right, how can it be so wrong and
Right.
and be out of alignment, like you are saying, Kasie? I think those are, and then a lot of the question about how do we get in alignment? How do we manage this? Can we really, change the way that we feel or where our mindset is? Victoria, what are you thinking and seeing there?
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with what, like, the whole alignment thing, but I also think a lot of times people come to us and they say, okay, my mind is telling me this, but my heart is telling me that. And so, I mean, I guess that kind of goes with the whole finding a way to align it. But then I get kind of like, in that situation, then it's like 2 different directions. So you're trying to figure out, like, how can we get those to go both one way or the other way or in the same way?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's going to come up. I had it in my show notes. One of my favorite titles for our show is "Trust Your Gut or Use Your Head." And Craig and I talked about, how do you mitigate that? How do you manage that? And it's another one of those phrases, right? Like, my mind tells me this and my heart tells me that. Well, which one do you listen to?
Right. I'm a huge fan of going with your gut, or like at least listening to your gut.
Well, let's look at what
Metaphorically.
that is, right? So there's literally different parts to this. So there's
Literally.
literally. What do you mean by that? Steal my
Well, I
thunder.
mean, you've got this as mind and heart. There's the Greek word for mind, which is nous, N-O-U-S,
Okay.
and then there's or cardia for heart, and then there's the third component. We're not touching on that. It's psyche. So heart, mind, and soul.
Oh, wow.
And this
okay.
has been going on for thousands of years. Is this
Perfect.
trichotomy that's going on? But just taking the mind and the heart, I think you can't. And I would disagree with you a little bit, Victoria. And that
Okay.
is
No.
okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay.
I'm open
No,
to
no,
you
no.
disagreeing with
I
me.
think you have to balance all three or all two of these.
Well, yeah,
the
but-
gut and the mind.
Well, go a little further with that, honestly, because you're right. I mean, people I think in simple terms, which is where I was in my mind. But you're right.
It's not black and white.
Right.
It's nuanced. There's decisions, and so you have to go and make it. When you make a decision, you have to say, okay, what does my rational mind say? What does my heart say? Where does my gut go with this? And so you have to balance the pros and the cons of that and make that decision. I think the problem is that when you're young, you more go with the impulsive decision. As you get older, you start to
Be
not
more
all the
thoughtful.
time.
Yeah.
Be more thoughtful, and you reflect. The problem is then you could go to the other extreme and is just use your rational mind.
Yeah, I also think that, I mean, would you agree, John, too, that like moral reasoning and other things like religious influence, things like that also, I believe, probably influence our ability to make decisions, that maybe our mind and our heart feel aligned in certain ways, but maybe we also think through like there being something greater than ourselves, and
Right.
and then allow that to help influence our decision making as well.
I would agree 100% on
Yeah.
that.
I guess it's interesting, right? Because I think I tried to simplify it in thinking about just the heart and the mind, and I looked at it in a way of using where I thought you were going, and you went in a different direction, which is great. But two distinctly different parts of our brain. Your limbic system, the amygdala, we've talked about the different facets
Right.
of how the emotional part of our brain, which is right
Reptilian
above
brain.
right above the brainstem, the little space right there that's in the middle of our brain, is one part for our emotions. It has nothing to do with our heart. Our heart just pumps blood, but we've put that symbolically in place to speak of matters of the heart. It's really the limbic system, and then the thought is the frontal cortex, the right behind your skull, the thinking part of your brain. And so those are the thoughts. So you have your thoughts, and then you have your feelings. But you're adding a whole nother component, which is, you're totally on point. It just complicates it so much, and I think creates an overwhelmed feeling for people, because you say the soul, and I like to think of it as the spirit, and ultimately what we're talking about is the subconscious, which is a big part of the way that we operate.
It's that roiling cauldron
Yes.
that comes up
And I think this is why I like this topic and thought that it would be an important thing to talk about. Can you control your mind and or your heart? Because people get so overwhelmed with this. And they get so overwhelmed with this in really difficult periods and times of their life that you just almost kind of feel disempowered and helpless, because I feel the way that I feel and I can't do anything about the way that I feel. I hear that a lot in therapy. And my retort is like, our whole industry is based on managing how it is that we feel. And it's an important understanding of how to go about doing that, which we definitely want to get to tonight. How do we manage this is an important part of what we're...
Well, Chris, how do you, let's say, would you have a client that says, well, it's just my feelings, this is how I feel, and this is why I cheated on my wife or my partner or something like this, or why I blew up at this person. It's just the way I am.
Right.
Yeah.
That's another one of those phrases. It's just the way I am.
It's just who I am.
It's who I am. It's what I am. It's at the core. Why would I want to change the way I am? Yeah, no, it's interesting. I don't go directly at confronting that, John, because I think that is overwhelming and challenging for a person. Instead, we'll explore that, right? And look at what factors into the way that you are? What factors into the way that you think? What's factoring into the ways that you feel? And are you comfortable with those decisions? How do you, rectify what your intentions are and how you develop intentionality? I mean, there's a lot of things to explore in and around that without, because people will feel like this is a core of who I am. I'm not, they'll be very attached to that until you do that exploration of all these different facets.
Yeah, I often, when people say things like that in my office, I do take a deeper dive, and we talk a lot about functions of behavior, right? So
There you go.
we start looking at it more from the perspective of kind of the iceberg mentality, right? Where the first time I was ever exposed to the iceberg was the iceberg of anger, where it's like anger's on the top and everything's below anger, and it has all these words. But I think that's very applicable as an example for lots of behaviors, right? Because every behavior has a function. So what we see is the externalized thing, like the affair is the behavior. But what we're not addressing is kind of the dangerous parts of the iceberg, right? And so we talk about what is underneath the surface, right? That undercurrent that's carrying us through. And so those are the thoughts and feelings of inadequacy, the thoughts and feelings of, this, that, or the third.
Fear.
But also I think what people sometimes neglect to understand about us as human beings is that no one is value, feeling, thought, or judgment free. No one living that has a limbic system and a functional brain is value, feeling, thought, or judgment free. And so we constantly will have automatic thoughts that get attached to feelings that lead to functions of behavior. So I think when we break it down and we look at it from a perspective of this is the behavior or outcome, let's talk about what are the undercurrents of these things, then I think you can kind of make it a more humanized experience for people to where we're all kind of in this shared ethic together of life.
Boy, there's a lot there.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's always a lot there. I'm a little complicated.
That's because it's the iceberg. Yeah. But didn't we get that in the Ivy class?
We text? Did, yeah.
Yeah, with the iceberg.
Yes.
Yeah.
Take a deep breath, listening audience. Yeah, I think I'll just show what it is that I'm feeling as I'm listening to you. I mean, I think I just want to reinforce again, this is why people get so overwhelmed with this and get captivated with stuck spots and hurt spots and impulsive behavior, because the iceberg is so much to deal with, isn't it? For those of you that don't know, of course, probably the iceberg metaphor is when you're looking at an iceberg in the middle of the ocean, you see a very little portion of what's above water. And that typically icebergs formulate with a massive amount of ice underneath the water. So a lot of what's going on is way beyond the behavior that you're trying to manage with your thoughts or your heart. And that iceberg, man, I don't know, what do you feel like when you think about dealing with that whole chunk of ice underneath the surface? It's scary. It's intimidating. It's overwhelming. It's like, I don't know how to manage myself with all that.
But I also think that it's challenging and it can be very empowering, because I think that when you're able to give name to things that have happened to you, it becomes a lot less scary to think about it from that perspective instead of what's wrong with me. And that's often the shift I want to see in my office. For anybody that comes in, is that this is not about what's wrong with you the majority of the time, right? This is about what has happened to you and how that is now transpiring in your life and in your relationships and in your employment, and really understanding that where you came from has had an impact on your brain and body, and the body and brain remember, and it carries it through.
You're really good at that, Kasie, I think, in I would imagine, I haven't observed you doing a therapy session, but hearing you talk about things, you bring that up a lot, which disempowers people. And I think it's really something that we should all, as therapists, be focusing on and doing. So young and old therapists out there alike, pay attention to what you just said.
Is that from the Body Keeps Score? Is that a bit of that?
It is a bit of that, yeah. It's really about like, resiliency-based focused therapies, acceptance and commitment. But trauma,
trauma.
The body keeps a score because that's how it remembers how to react and keep you safe, even when there's not clear and present danger.
Yeah. Do you all do? And I'm tacking a little bit differently. Do you all do any dream work with your clients or patients? In other words, talking about.
Not
Is that
much.
kind of woo with you guys? Or what?
No, it's not woo-woo work. I
Woo-woo.
use that phrase a lot.
Oh, woo-woo.
I do. It's. I don't see a lot of trainings on that, John. I very rarely see our field dealing with that. In pure psychology realms, they do a little bit. They've studied it and whatnot. But honestly, I don't think we understand a lot of the dynamics of dreams.
And I think, but that is the iceberg. That's what's underneath. And
It
so
gets at that. And
Yeah.
what I tell people when it comes to that is that it isn't so much what you dream. And I don't do a lot of dream analysis because there's a lot of symbolism that's specific to the person that can be difficult to weed through. So when I am dealing with that, because I get a lot of questions on dreams, I will just go with what you feel in your dream.
Or what do you think it means to you? Do you
Not even that. To me,
that.
it's the emotion that you're feeling.
Yeah.
Like I'm scared
Stay
and
with
I'm
that,
running,
yeah.
or I'm confident and I killed the beast, or I'm whatever emotion is what I pay attention
Yeah.
to a lot more. Just because I think it's so much more clear.
Yeah, I've done a lot of like personal dream work in my own therapy sessions with my own therapist, and I think that it's wonderful if you can get to a place to where you can better understand those components. Just because, like, whether it's symbolism or not, I think that it has an impact overall about re-experiencing emotion, right? Like you write to a lot of that in your book, but I think that that re-experiencing part is really important sometimes with dream work, as you pointed out.
Casey, let's center us a little bit.
Sorry.
The two there.
No,
What-
I'm
what
the
are
one
the-
that derailed you.
No, you're fine. That's why we have an awesome panel, John, for
Yeah.
real. But Victoria, what are the specific areas that let's focus our conversation in to think about all these specific areas. I mean, we hit A real easily, right? Everyone thinks about, all right, when you're going to control your mind and you're going to control your heart, that's because of situations of an affair. But there are others I was thinking about.
Yeah. Like from this list, yeah. Like coping with kids growing up, empty nesting, divorce, or being a kid of a divorced family. Like, yeah.
Keep going.
Oh, keep going. Okay.
Just to center us in on where
Just
we're
like
at.
just read the list.
Coping with separation when you're not when you're the one that's not choosing the separation, moral decisions based on culture or your faith tradition, major career decisions is what I think. That's a typo.
I thought that was Caesar.
Car ears.
Our ears.
Wow.
And graduating students facing the quote unquote rest of their life.
So I'm thinking in terms of Erickson's stages.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
And most of and I deal with a lot of people that are in college age and dealing with the career issue,
Yeah.
with marriage, divorce, separation, breaking up with partners,
Right.
coming out, dealing.
Oh, that's another big
Yeah.
one. Yep. I
Big
didn't
one.
have that on
was
my
not
big
list.
one.
Yeah, that was not on the list.
And people that are facing retirement or are making those big decisions in midlife, and I think the children, empty nesting is tough.
Yeah. These were some of the things I was just thinking about because there's a lot of things in life that we are faced with, and it isn't just, sexual relationships or marriage and dating. that's where people go to first. But there are really a lot of these other areas that we really have to kind of be in mind, be in alignment, to use your word, Kasie, on what is our heart trying to feel through our emotions, what is our head and thoughts trying to think through, and to add, John, your idea with the soul, what is your soul really screaming for? Those are all playing out with these different areas of life as well. And it occurs to me as I'm saying this that I is it true? What do y'all think? Is it true that people might feel more confident in some of those other areas, such as life decisions, career decisions, thoughtfulness about that, than we do romantic relationships? I feel like anecdotally, I hear people in more of a panic over dating relationships and marriage and stuff than some of these other areas when we're trying to get in alignment with our thoughts and our heart. What do y'all think?
I don't know. I think that the majority of people that I see now, to kind of preface this, I would say that the population of people I would see range between the ages of like 21 to 50 normally. Like I'm not getting a lot of people now prior to the age of 21 and not a lot of people over the age of 50, just in my own personal practice.
Oh, just in your practice.
In my own personal practice. I am seeing, in all honesty, like post-pandemic, right? So we're still in the pandemic, but post-2020 up until today, I see a lot of existential crises that I think are all-encompassing in a way. Like I've seen a lot of people go through a lot of marital issues, but also this like identity crisis of who am I and why am I here?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think a lot of single people that are not in relationships or not in significant like partnerships, they've been having a lot of existential crises about like being by themselves, being alone forever, transitioning into like the latter half of their life without someone, never having kids, like who takes care of you when you're older. Like I've seen a lot of that. And then I've seen a lot of people younger than myself, probably more around Victoria's age, that are having that whole career debacle because they went to online school, finished up online, and now they're in like a real job, but they don't really know how to relate to coworkers. They don't know how to relate to the real world. They don't know how to do a lot of career-oriented things because of re-engagement with society. And so it's interesting.
Yeah, I don't want to go too far off onto this tangent.
Sure.
Go ahead, Victoria.
Well, no, I was going to say, since I'm actually in a high school, I feel like I'm seeing that with like the juniors and seniors. That I'm seeing that some of them are like really like at a loss of where like what they want to do after school. And you could attribute some of that to the like lack of socialization that they got at the beginning of their high school careers. And
so they've lost a real component of their lives because
been a lot of loss.
Yeah, because a lot of as much socialization goes on in high schools traditionally, that prepares you for life and for living and getting along with people outside your family group.
Yeah, but I want to go off on this tangent. I'm going to hold us and pull us back. The reason why I want to go off on this tangent, though, is because I've seen that in my own kids, age 21 and 18, and it is just, it breaks my heart for what they just have not been able to learn with and engage on. And a lot of this, it strikes me as we're talking, and thank you, Victoria, for bringing that up that way, because a lot of what we're talking about probably lends to additional deficits, in the students and the young people for the experiences that they haven't been able to have. So that's a really good point. But let me pull us back. Okay. So do we influence yourself through your thoughts, or do we influence yourself through your emotions?
Or both.
I know, right? I guess that's an easy one for the panel.
I think they work in tandem in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Like you have an automatic thought. The crux of CBT,
right.
Thoughts and feelings get coupled together, typically leading to a behavior, right? And sometimes it's a chicken and an egg situation, right? Like I have a feeling first and that perpetuates a thought, or I have a thought first and perpetuates a feeling.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's hard to distinguish between the two. But, I don't know. That's an interesting toss-up.
John's in thought.
Well, I was thinking I was between Greek thought, ancient Greek thought, and Hebrew thought. I'm sorry. go
Wow.
on. So, and
Keep
This
going.
this could
and
be
this-
interesting. Go on.
the split is that the traditional Greek thought is that we're either mind or we're body. We're either or, and so you don't get that nuance. It's that there's a real split. But in the Hebraic thinking, the ancient Jews, is the idea that we're a mind-body unit together, and you can't really separate it. And the idea of wholeness is how are these different parts of you working together, and that it becomes one. Okay, so wholeness is becoming. It's not either or. It's a process of becoming.
And I think that's a really detailed and smart and depthy way of saying both, right?
Yeah.
You know, because you can't do one or the other, and that's where we landed on. You might enjoy the show, episode 27, going all the way back. Decision making: trust your gut or use your head. And then I don't know who I did it with, but was it episode 202? I guess that was with y'all. We discussed the emotions. We discussed the show rather, how emotions can drive day-to-day experiences. And so we were kicking this around during that episode. So it would be cool to kind of compare these two. Because where we really land is you can't do one or the other. But which one do you think the listening public quickly falls to?
Feelings.
Yeah? Interesting.
I was gonna say thoughts.
Me too. You went tiebreaker, John?
Oughts.
Thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So why did you say feelings, Kasie?
I feel like a lot of times people act on feelings first and then recognize the thought behind it.
I can see that.
Okay. Right. Okay. I wonder if the three of us were thinking about how do we manage our behavior? How do we manage our heart? How do we manage our thoughts? And people go with their thinking first in that domain. But it's interesting the angle you took that, which I wasn't clear. It's, I wasn't really clear on that. When you're looking at your behavior, you're right. You're probably going directly toward your emotions. Mm-hmm. Just I feel the way that I feel. What can I do about that? Kind of thinking.
Yeah, I often explain it in practice about okay, let's say that you're driving behind somebody and the person in front of you gets in a car accident, right? And this kind of dips into dialectical behavioral therapy between the emotional brain, the rational brain, and the wise mind, which is that centrifuge of thinking.
Yep.
But you're driving behind somebody, that person gets in a car accident. If I get out of the car or another person gets out of the car, I'm probably approaching the scene with some emotionality. I'm calling the police. I'm like, is everyone okay? What's going on? Trying to assess what's happening.
Or you did this to me. Why did you run into my...
Right. Things like
Okay.
that, okay? But
Compulsive reaction.
Compulsive.
Right.
compulsive reaction. I'm in my emotional brain more than likely because something is hijacking my systems to kind of decide what we're going to do next. But when EMS arrives on the scene, could you imagine if EMS arrives?
They can't operate
and
that
then
way.
uses that same operational system to
they can't
approach
do
the
that.
same accident. They can't do that, right? They have to use the rational brain to really assess and get in there and do the
And they
work.
have to triage.
And they have to triage and do whatever's next. Now, what happens though is that both parties leaving the accident, who have bared witness to the accident and helped rescue the accident, have to decompress that in a different way to balance it out. So if I'm high in my emotional zone, doing something rational can help me balance. So if I'm really high with feelings, doing something that requires a lot of thought can actually be very helpful in the moment to balance myself out. If I'm the EMS person, which I work with a lot of EMS and first responders, and I have to approach a traumatic accident with a rational brain, talking about it, working through that narrative and giving some emotionality and connection to another person can help balance me out. And so I think it's interesting how the brain works, that sometimes to get the balance, doing an opposite action can really benefit whether you're starting from emotional place or starting from a thoughts place.
That's interesting. And I was thinking in terms of working with a lot of my EMS, my first responders, and medical professionals, is that so often they have to be very rational and logical and by the book and make those decision trees, and it's all very rational. But when they let loose, this is where sometimes they get in trouble. They have trouble with their relationships. They don't know how to deal with their emotions or to do that constructively. There's an addiction issues that they have, and so what you're saying is a wonderful way of recognizing both the thoughts and the emotions. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Which is probably why we have both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and what's interesting is we're not talking about the spirit. You're calling it the soul. We could call it the subconscious, and how that kind of comes into the mix as well. And I think that is by far, and the reason why I wasn't going to try to tackle it tonight, John, but I love that you brought it up, right? Because by far the least understood, the least that we have ability to directly manage, the least that we have the understanding, even at this point in science, to interact with. Even, I mean, the best thing we've got is hypnosis, which is really cool stuff. What? No?
I don't like hypnosis.
Yeah, okay, well, but that's I don't really either. I don't use it a lot for very specific reasons, which I won't go
Do you find
into
that
now.
manipulative?
I do.
Okay.
Interesting. Yeah, but what else do we have of really influencing, your spirit, your soul? How do you, which I don't really have an answer. I don't know that we have an answer. Does anybody have an answer?
Oh, I think to influence the spirit and the soul, well, I think it depends on what your practices are. Like if you're...
Well, that's your behavior.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's part of the behavior, but I
Yeah.
think that, in like speaking from Christian religious tradition, that is a relationship though. Like I think outside of yourself, it's a relationship with a different entity, right? So
Sure.
having that relationship and the influence of that relationship in your life is making a commitment to thinking through like the teachings and the religious underpinnings of decision making, commandments, what you're called to do.
Yeah, let me
being
jump
in alignment
in,
with
though,
the will of
because
God.
I think I'm not trying to avoid religion.
Sure.
But what I'm trying to pull us back into, it's an interesting thought process to think about just purely subconsciousness. You're right. I'm with you totally. But if you're thinking purely from a secular perspective without religion in play, we can still say that we have a subconsciousness. We still have, that's what you mean by soul, and you like to use the word spirit.
Sure.
How do we influence that? I think we influence that through our thoughts or our feelings, and then bring forward what our subconsciousness is trying to tell us.
Yeah, I was gonna say, or the subconscious influences our thoughts and our feelings.
Oh yeah, they most
you know
certainly
what I mean?
do.
Like,
but we can observe that and interact with that. I think it's a true statement. Only through our thoughts and feelings. Is that a true statement?
So
What says the pastor? Oh dear, religion. Here we go.
no, the therapy.
Therapy. Good.
Therapy is a way of being able to center one's thoughts and feelings together and integrate the self into a whole being.
Wow, that's an advertisement for therapy if I ever heard one. Say that again, because that's
I
on
can't
point.
say it.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a way to integrate. I like that. I like the word integration
Yeah.
because that
The
really
thoughts
is
and
what
the
has
feelings
to happen.
together.
Right.
Yeah, and make a whole person, make oneself more whole.
Yeah, the therapeutic process.
It's not it's not you don't just get cured of a serious mental illness or a physical illness. You are in a process of becoming more whole.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Which, yeah, I think that's part of like, and I may have mentioned this before, but like part of when, and I actually had a client ask me about this today, but the fact that I like, we're not here to fix people. Like we're just here to help guide them to like a better self, but I'm not here to like heal you or fix you or like,
Yeah, though
that
we're
kind
in
of
the
thing,
healing
so-
profession for sure, and there's healing that goes on through a facilitated process.
Right.
Right. And I think that's, John, what I hear you kind of saying, which is the therapeutic process.
And that is a wondrous thing to be a part of
Oh, my
as a
gosh.
therapist. It's
It's a huge honor.
yeah, it is an honor.
It's a huge honor.
The people let you in their lives and they share their deepest selves, their most authentic selves.
What
Yeah.
we do for a living,
It's very humbling.
it is hugely humbling.
Yeah.
And yeah, young therapists, pay attention to the respect of the process when somebody comes to your office for an initial therapy session. It is, to me, it's one of the most biggest deals we deal with. And I say it every time I meat with somebody new. I go through as part of my spiel to
Well,
to
and
put
I
that
think
out.
it's also like when then they choose to come back. Like they, I mean, yeah, you have those that just come see you, and don't click with you. But when they choose to like actively come back, I
Oh,
feel like
yeah.
that's when it's really, at least that's when it's really humbling for me.
Mhm.
Because then,
You can be a part of the process.
Right.
Yeah, you think there's another word, another Greek word. I'm sorry, dynamis.
Yes.
Okay, dynamite. You're handling dynamite
Oh,
when
wow.
you're in this process, and both of you, the therapist and the client or the patient, is participating in that dynamic,
And that's a dynamis.
a dynamis. Yeah.
Yeah, it's powerful, and for those of you listening and wondering, about the mysteriousness of therapy, it's also there's not a lot of mystery that goes on. It's having conversations, and in a conversation that is very different than any that you can have in a life outward, because it's 100% focused on your process, and that's what makes therapy. When I'm supervising younger clinicians, I always love to make sure they understand this is the first time in a therapy session, quite possibly, this person has had a conversation like this. You almost cannot replicate it outside of a therapy relationship.
Yeah, I think that's why I often encourage people that because they really want to know, like, how do I stop myself from thinking this? How do I stop myself from feeling this
really
way?
do.
They want to know that. And I think it's really more about not necessarily stopping the thoughts or stopping the feelings, because a lot of this comes to us automatically. But I think if you can make a shift in your life from reactivity to responsiveness, that is the point of therapy. If you can become less initially reactive and more thoughtfully responsive, then I think that is the power, that is the control, that is the ability to mitigate and become in alignment with your thoughts
So
and feelings.
people are assuming the responsibility.
Yes, exactly.
So that's a nice segue,
I thought so. That's why I added it
Kasie. So, well, you could have segued to the emotions because I wanted to hit the emotions first, but we'll go in reverse order. So the segue is, how do you manage your thoughts? What do you do when you're making a choice to intervene on your thoughts? Let's focus for a moment on what do you do. We've got cognitive behavioral therapy. Everyone talks about doing it. I mean, that's the key and crucial part of the major ingredients of what we're doing with CBT. Cognitive behavioral therapy. We're looking at your cognition.
Bless you.
God bless you, Neil. That probably showed up on the mics.
Gazoon tight.
That was a good one. Cognition in your thoughts and mitigating the damaging negative thinking patterns. In AA, they talk about stinking thinking. You ever hear that expression?
Oh, yeah.
Right? And reframing the things that you're thinking about and identifying thinking errors that you have in the thought process. In cognitive behavioral therapy, I always like to look out at permanency words, directly observing yourself in the way that you're thinking every time you blah, blah, blah. I always, you never do, da, da, da. I always see every time you do, like any of those everyone, no one, forever words. That's an opportunity to cognitively reframe your thinking process. Like, I'm hitting all these things and rambling on. I guess I'll let you guys join. But how do we manage our thoughts, right? Like, that's what we want to focus on for a moment.
So I think, honestly, what I see in my office is the first step is accepting the thoughts. Because what I see a lot of is a lot of avoidance of thoughts. Like a thought comes in and people want to suppress the thought or hide it or push it away because it's uncomfortable, or it creates a feeling of uncomfortability or a feeling that they don't want to experience. And so I see a lot of suppression of thought. And to me, the first thing that we want to do is work on accepting that thought that comes, because then we can deal with it.
As crazy as it might be,
Yeah.
as weird as it might be,
As weird as it might be.
as scary as it might be,
Absolutely.
as awkward and unacceptable as it might be.
Yes.
You're being ironic.
Don't you think?
Tell you. These are the things that people
Right.
think, no, you don't know what I think.
Right.
And what I hear you saying is, no, it is okay.
Yeah, because a thought is not an action nor a behavior.
Right.
It's just a thought.
Right.
So let's talk about it. And let's talk about how we got to a place to where these are the things that we're kind of keeping on this broken record of thought.
I like it. I love
Yeah.
it.
And
Actually.
I like to remind my patients or my clients that or patient whatever that kind of along the lines of what Kasie is saying is that yes, it's just a thought, and most of them are automatic. So when you accept it, that's the thought is the thought, but what is important is what you do with the thought. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, do you avoid it, or do you try to reframe it or rephrase it or refocus it or whatever to make it either more positive or whatever you need it to be, if it's, say, a negative thought or whatever kind of thought it is.
Or something that you don't want to do that the thought leads you to doing it.
Yeah.
Like these are ways to manage that. Like, the top of the show, right? Can you control your heart and can you control your mind? And the answer is yes. And these get to like the how do you do that? What are the actions? What are the methodologies? How do you deal with that in therapy? But also just how do you deal with that in your life, right?
Yeah.
And people can be empowered that way.
Can I give a personal example?
Okay, sure.
Go for it.
So, going through a separation, headed towards divorce. This is the first year that I've had Thanksgiving Day without my biological children, right?
Yeah, I
So
know.
first holiday, first major milestone and event, okay?
Tough stuff.
So initially, I'm not going to lie, I was like an emotional wreck about it, right? Like, this is the hardest day of my life. I'm calling my mom, like all the things. But then I realized from something that she said that helped me kind of regain
She,
control
you?
over the thought. My mom.
Oh,
Is the date important or is the experience important? And what that helped me do was understand that I can still have Thanksgiving with my children. It's not going to be on Thursday the 26th or whatever, but we had Thanksgiving on the 19th of November.
okay.
And so we had a full Thanksgiving meal. My kids are present. Is it the experience or is it the date that's important? And to me, that really reshaped the way I was able to kind of come to terms with it and think about it, because it's really not the date, it's the experience. And so had I tried to ignore the thought, suppress it, push it away, or the feelings, or, like try to numb out or whatever the case may be and just sit and wallow in that sorrow, I would have been a wreck throughout that regular Thanksgiving Day when my siblings showed up with all of their children and I'm the only sibling without my kids. There was a lot of things in that. But the reshaping and reframing, like what Victoria was saying, was vitally important for me to regain control over my emotional state and my mental state to be able to make it through the holiday.
Wow.
And so I think it also, what that does is it better prepares you in the future for similar experiences, right? Like if you are successful in getting through this experience and the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior, then there's nothing to say that you won't be successful in the future when interfacing with the same kind of challenges, right?
I really appreciate that, Kasie. It's a powerful depiction in real time in a genuine way, and thank you for your courage to share and show that.
Sure.
Because I think honestly, it gives people the hope that I would love to create by this episode. The hope that people can really get through those tough times in their marriage, that they can really get through this scary time of graduating after high school or college, John. This tough time of bankruptcy that you fall into, or these experiences of feeling the way you feel when you're coming out, reconciling being gay or lesbian or trans. You know, these tough times when you're really attracted to your coworker and you want to have an affair, like, you know, you have domain over the experiences that you have. That's just so powerful.
So
Casey.
you're saying you can choose your own way. In
Yeah.
other words, how to approach that. And I would like to back up with what Kasie said is that in my if you don't know, I'm a Presbyterian minister as well as a therapist and a professor. And the thing is that I very rarely with our family got to celebrate Christmas with a lot of families. I mean, with our extended family. And a wonderful thing that my mom did, and she's still alive, is that she would hold Christmas 2 days after Christmas.
Yeah.
So in other words, so we were able to fully participate in the experience. And I think some of my brothers and my sisters were appreciated that as well because it took some of the pressure off of them.
Mm-hmm.
So,
you know, the freedom that we have is counteracted by the chains of guilt and shame and almost obsessive or compulsive adherence to strict standards. And I'm sorry, the world just doesn't operate very well in that real way with so many of the dynamics that we have going on, with first responders having no schedules and military families across the pond, and, you know, things happening all around the world that, you know, changed families, Kasie, and, you know, shifting issues in our life. I mean, look, like, have the emotional freedom to be in control through some of these methods in some of these ways. I love this little segment that we're in.
one more thought, because where y'all were going with this, and you were talking about the story and all of that, sometimes I have my clients write their life story, and
Narrative therapy.
and they get to re-author
Yeah.
the story. So one of the things when I go with my client is, okay, we talk. I do in a sense, a little exploratory interview, and they'll stop at a certain spot and then say, okay, and we reflect on that.
Mm-hmm.
Casey's winking at me because she sees Roman numeral 3 with item C underneath the thing is absolutely that. On point, John, as always. We're on the same page because there's a lot in a story. There's a huge amount in a story, and that has to do with your thoughts and what you're thinking through that. And you're right, the narrative strategies that we operate with, you can literally rewrite your story in the way that you think about it, experience it, and even remember it. And then we're not changing facts. We're not changing events, but we're changing what they mean to you, what the experience is. And I've had people with trauma stories, for sure, write and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite yet again over a period of time, the processing of that.
Well,
It's wonderful.
that's cognitive processing therapy
Yeah.
as well.
Right on.
CPT.
Right on. It's a component of that. Also, constructiveness theory. You know?
I think it's wonderful, too, when you look at the narrative and regaining power over the narrative, because that also helps with generational things to come, right? Like, the narrative that maybe has plagued you for so long can stop with you. And so that gives power to the person, I think.
Did you say generational components?
Yeah.
Right.
So that, like, generational traumas that have happened over and over again can stop with you.
It's a very powerful reality that I, early on in my career, had no idea of understanding what that was. And I want to tell you real quick the journey of where I experienced that. Because I heard I'm a substance abuse clinician as well as mental health clinician. And early on in my career, I heard somebody make a statement that I was like, nah, come on, that's crazy talk right there. There's no way. That doesn't make any sense to me. And what they said was, if you take one person's alcoholic dysfunction in the family system, that it takes 3 generations to recover and heal from that one person's reality. And what you just spoke to that. And I've come to kind of find, of course, that is to say, if your dad was an alcoholic, then your sobriety, your kids' sobriety, by the time your grandkids come around, they're freer, if not free from those generational realities. Like, that's a mouthful. That's a lot there.
But I think it also implies that it means that the people in those 3 generations need to be working towards
Oh yeah.
Correct.
correcting
And
it. And it's
recognition.
not, and that they're not just sitting idle by and just like.
Yeah, you have a
making
job to do.
But-
you still have to work to make it to where then by that 4th generation, they are freer. But if there is no progress being made, and I think we see a lot of that right now with like mental health being so much like advocated for and people actually wanting and to break those generational traumas and curses and whatever you want to call it. I think that is, we're like working more towards being able to, they're setting up their kids to be able to, be that 3rd, 4th generation that can be freer.
But that gives a person a motivation for change and choice. And so that person in the next, let's say your father was an alcoholic and he's been dead 20 or 30 years. You were raised in that family that there was, in a sense, you took on a lot of his characteristics. You are, in a sense, a dry drunk. And I'm sorry about using old terms, but
That's a
But it's
use
true.
it.
Yeah.
but there is a sense that one comes to that awareness. That's what you were saying, Victoria. I think.
There's a powerful meme that I saw recently that gets at this that I want to point out and add to the points that you're talking about, where with this picture, there's a lot that could be said in a picture. I'm going to try to describe it. Demonstrates like what you can actively do. As you said, Victoria, you are in a different generation when you still have actions to take. And so
Right.
the meme is this tall old man standing on the left of the page, and he's got coming out of his mouth, you could just tell venom. It's an angry old man standing. And just to the right of that man is another younger, middle-aged man holding up like a shield, right, in his arm at that anger, criticism, angst that you can see coming from the old man. And then he's kind of also at the same time kneeling. And so you have like this downward trend where the angry venom is coming, the shield is there, he's on a kneel, and to the right of him on the page is this young boy who's facing the opposite direction, watching TV or playing a video game or whatever. And you can tell that the middle-aged man is kind of in his ear. I love you. I support you. I'm here for you. While he's holding the shield. I mean, to me, it's just, when you have these family dynamics and these things.
It's very vivid.
It's vivid.
Imagery. Yeah.
Like, you can do that for yourself and for the people that you love and care about, i.e. are parenting underneath of you.
I think that's why the whole gentle parenting thing is like so much on the right. Like, it is such a big thing right now, is because you have so many people trying to set up their kids for better experiences, better lives, because you're actively choosing to. And it's not saying that everybody's perfect, but that at least people are trying to make improvements.
So, super good things. I want to end up with this thought intervention. I believe and see that choosing your focus points are a huge component of this as well, right? Now, I didn't realize this when I was writing that book, Re-Understanding Emotions and Becoming Your Best Self. I am going to be making a class and a course out of it, is my intention. I guess I just announced that, Neil, to the world. So now we better deliver, right? And in doing that, what I did was I took all the chapters of the book and I came out with 4 similar areas of whittling that whole writing project down. And one of those 4 areas, literally, the whole book is like, how do I understand and manage all my emotions? And one of the whole areas of that was focus points. I had quotes over the years. That's how the book got created. And whittling all of that material down to how do you manage yourself, I came to focus points. And choosing what you focus on, to me, has become a really big part of how do you manage your heart? How do you manage your mind? You choose literally what you focus on. I'm sure you guys can run with that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense to that you choosing what you're focusing on. I mean, I think it's back to the integration that John was talking about as well. So, like, if my thoughts and feelings are driving me to want to like lay down or sit down or rest in that, or my brain is telling me like, you need to like shut down or shut off or distract or things like that. I think if you refocus on doing an opposite action of getting up, invigorating movement, like
Working out.
doing things like that, it can really help bring balance to the brain and body.
Right. You literally do choose what you focus on. And unfortunately, we get stuck in glass half empty kind of thing. I mean, that's the proverbial glass half empty, glass half full. Which one do you recognize?
Yeah.
And
It's
there's
something to drink.
right. And
That's how I see it.
And it's something there to sustain you. It's something that's there for you, not something that's been taken from you, not something that's been, drained already. I'm telling you, it is a powerful reality. And we don't have a lot of time to use all the examples of this, but I could go on and on and on in thinking about what we focus on. If you focus on the sexuality of your business partner and attraction, what do you think is going to happen? Furthermore, if you focus on the aspects of your wife that you cannot stand or your husband that drives you nuts, what do you think you're going to be experiencing? If you focus on the things that your kids do wrong and catch them and correct them and criticize them, how do you think this is going to go? Like, I could go on and
I was
on.
going to say, I preach this to my kids at school all the time. If you focus on the fact that you're going to fail a test, you're like...
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you can change that and focus on how you're going to pass a test instead, like you're more likely to have a way better outcome.
Right. But I think if you also trace that back, like what Chris and John and everybody else I think has said today, like if you trace it back, more than likely, this is what has happened to you. Right. And so from like family of origin or how you grew up. And so I think my kind of like takeaway from today would be that old adage, and I think I've said it on here before, is if you don't heal what hurt you, you start to bleed on people that didn't cut you. And that's your kids, your wife, your coworkers. So really trying to understand and explore, like focusing on healing what hurt you so you don't bleed on people that aren't cutting you.
Say that again, Kasie.
If you don't heal what hurt you, you will bleed on people that didn't cut you.
It's a really, really cool phrase.
That's wonderful.
Let's not forget, in wrapping up here, we didn't talk a lot about influencing and managing your emotions. I think, John, earlier you were kind of talking about, well, the therapeutic process gets at that, right?
Exactly.
And also I want to point the listening audience, if you've really enjoyed this show, we don't have any time to go back over it. I was thinking it was so important to review that I was going to go back through it, where we did, where is it? Episode, shoot, I thought I had it.
Is it 202?
202, that's right. In episode 202, where we really took a deep dive on Adlerian psychology specifically and how you go through paying attention to your emotion. You've got to allow your emotion to be present, because as we had a in-depth conversation about that, I think that was me and you, or whoever it was here, I forget.
I think I was here.
You were
I think
definitely
all four
here.
of us
We
were
were
we
here.
all four?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those emotions are really trying to tell you something, and you would best be advised to pay attention.
Yeah, you have to
Right?
feel your feelings so you don't become them. Like, feel them and then do something about them so that you don't have to overwhelmingly always become them.
That's empowering. That's, living. That's
Yeah.
being in control of your mind and your thoughts. You can go either way. You can influence in through your thinking. You can influence in through your emotions. And I think that we need to come together as a panel, John, to figure out how we can influence through our soul. But that's a whole nother next level,
Yeah,
right?
save that for another day.
Baptism.
Right.
Amen.
Thank you.
So listen, I've just really enjoyed this conversation,
cool.
guys.
Yeah.
I think this has been a wonderful conversation because this is something that I find people struggling with intently. They're struggling with feeling in control of their heart and feeling in control of their thoughts and feeling disempowered, and find yourself in stuck spots, landed in places where you're completely disempowered. Click rewind, listen to this show again, because I think that you'll find, seriously, like a lot of nuggets here that are really can lead to you being in control of your heart, in balance and in alignment with your thoughts, so that you can be a whole person, as we've talked about today. Take care, stay well, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.